Hello and welcome back to the Not Load Firm YouTube channel. My name is Ben Banks, joined again by James Black after his brief hiatus from the channel to preview the Scotland versus Israel clash in Euro 2020 playoff semi-final action. It's a massive game for the country ahead of next month's playoff final. The winner of this one between Scotland and Israel at Hampden, meeting Serbia or Norway next month for a place at next summer's Euro 2020 in the summer of 2021. Due to the ongoing effects of the pandemic, tournament was cancelled in the summer. We're playing it again next summer, but it'll be an interesting one for Scotland. It's a massive game. The country, there seems to be a wee bit of more excitement about this game, and we'll have build up to it here as well. We'll have instant reaction to the game, whether it's actual elation for Scotland this time or whether it's more heartbreak as they aim to get to the first tournament in my lifetime. As well as that, we've got lots of content going out in the channel. We've had stuff from transfer deadline day. We've had previews to the League Cup games. We've had reviews coming up of these games coming up as well as the UEFA Nations League games. We'll do a preview for the start of them, and we'll have an instant reaction at the end of the second game next week. And we'll have a Lewis Spence exclusive on Friday, the former Dundee, Dunfermline and Ross County midfielder. But now all the boring stuff out the way, we'll look at the actual football, Scotland versus Israel. James, how do you, first of all, what are your overall thoughts on the game? It's Israel became very normal opponents, whilst there's not been a lot of international football over the last sort of year due to the pandemic. We always seem to be playing Israel these days.
Yeah, Scotland need to win this game. I'm going to just come right out with it and say if Scotland don't win this, they should bin Steve Clarke, start again, look for somebody new. Because it is, I don't know, I'm of an age where I've seen quite a few of these most important games in a generation for Scotland now. And I don't know, it kind of gets to the point where something drastic needs to be done. I do think Israel are a very much beatable team. We've seen them recently. They were no great shakes when they played them in the recent games. So definitely winnable. But whether Scotland go out and do what Scotland usually do and grasp glorious failure, we'll see.
Yeah, I think the big thing, I mean, it's just, I feel like there should, although there is excitement built more so than most international matches, I feel like there should be more. Like there hasn't been, I don't know if it's because as well, a lot of the domestic clubs are playing through this in the international break, and perhaps fans, I mean, for me anyway, in the modern game, for a lot of people, club does come before country now. It's not like back in the sort of 80s and 90s where you obviously loved your club competition, but watching your country play was a real buzz. I don't think that's there anymore. I think, like, for example, just to pick a club off the top of my hat, St Mirren versus Partick Thistle are playing. St Mirren Partick Thistle fans are probably more bothered about that game just because it involves their club than it does the country. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but for me, that's the general vibe I get from certain players. But I just feel, even though there is more excitement than usual, there perhaps should be more. I mean, it is a massive game for Scotland, and if they get through, now granted it doesn't secure them a place at Euro 2020, but it'd be a massive lift.
I think because it's a back door through the back door, people are just a bit kind of, you know, it's not it's not as if it's a playoff at the end of usual Euro qualifying campaign. So it's not kind of got the same lustre to being like the playoffs as it usually would be because it came through the Nations League, and that's still a kind of format that I'm not convinced that everybody totally gets their head around yet. I'm not sure everybody's quite like, oh, this is quite grasped quite how important a game it is for Scotland against Israel.
No, I feel it's better. I mean, I don't know, but I think people, as you say, I don't think the magnitude of this game is quite grasped yet. That I think it'll only hit in once the game's done. Either way, whether Scotland do proceed or whether Scotland get beat. Like if Scotland get beat, then it's. I don't know if I'd be calling for Steve Clarke's head. To be fair, I don't know if I'd go that far. I feel like there's just been so much change in that managerial post that you need somebody there.
Well, let me put that one to you in a particular way, okay? Right, so let's say Scotland do lose to Israel, and it's more of the same kind of. I don't want to say drivel, but it's the same kind of half-heartedness we've seen far too many times from Scotland over the last 22 years since France. Have you seen anything from Steve Clarke's Scotland side that makes you suddenly think that this next qualification campaign, this is the one?
I think not so much seeing things from it, but I think when you look at the squad, you look at the squad and think this.
That's it. Do you know how many times I've heard that over the last 20 years?
I think
Look at
this
the
is
squad. Look at the squad. I mean, 20 years ago, it was look at the midfield. It was Barry Ferguson, Paul Lambert, Craig Burley. 5 years after that, it was look at this. And you had, I don't know, pick 5 players out from in the squad in 2006 and 2007. 4 or 5 years after that, it was the next crop of players. And every time they keep going, oh, look at the squad. This is the next one. Yeah, it's not. And I think we're at the point now where if Scotland don't make it through this, then let's try reinvent the wheel. Let's try something completely different.
well, I mean, I'm not old enough to remember the ins and outs of the Betty Vault era, but from what I gather, when they did reinvent the wheel last time, it didn't exactly go to plan.
It got exactly as far as we did now.
That's the thing. That's
180,
Scotland is that
180 minutes away from a major finals. So we're as close sitting today as we were before you were born.
yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing for me is that surely now it doesn't matter who it is, what squad it is that eventually results have to start coming from somewhere
I mean,
in terms of not just nearly failures. Oh, we did well in this game, but still get beat. There's not enough actual success you can look back on and goes, we did this, we qualified for that.
people always want to point to the Bertie Vogts era as the kind of low tide mark for Scotland, and kind of the modern era at least. How many managers have we had since?
Not enough with success. I don't.
We've had Burley, you've had McLeish twice, you've had Strachan, we've had Steve Clarke, we've had Levine. I think we've had Walter Smith. Did we have Walter twice?
Walter Smith's my time.
But it's, we've had all these managers in and getting to a playoff. That's that. It's as much as we've got to show for almost the last quarter of a century.
It feels, anyway, it feels slightly closer and slightly more attainable when you look at the teams. I mean, Israel, Scotland are. I mean, Israel showed that they're probably a match for Scotland if they're up to it, and if Scotland don't show up. But Norway and Serbia again are probably two teams you could argue are probably stronger than Scotland just now. I mean, especially if they play Norway. And I know it's the really basic thing to do and just pick out one player. But Erling Haaland. Haaland against, with all due respect to Scotland in that three back formation. I mean, and that's another thing I suppose we'll talk about as well. The three at the back. I mean, square holes, round pegs. Scott McTominay been shoehorned in there. Kieran Tierney's been put into the back three, although I think he actually works fairly well.
Imagine what Haaland will do if we go with a back three. It's got Scott, and I like Scott McTominay as a player, but can you imagine what Haaland would do to a back three with Scott McTominay in the middle of it?
Oh, it would just. I don't even want to think as far as that game because I mean, who knows? I mean, Serbia might get through that game, and that's not exactly an easy game.
Yeah, they might.
But it's and the thing is as well, Stephen Reid and Steve Clarke have both been really positive about the 3-5-2 in the way that's been spoken about recently. Is that is going to be the system that they go with from the start? They could change up a bit, but by the sounds of it, it looks like that will be played again. Whether you see McTominay in that system, I don't know. I think McTominay's a really good sitting midfielder with a really bright future. And I mean, albeit Manchester United are suffering.
Yeah,
Now,
I felt the 3-5-2 was always kind of designed to get James Forrest into the side one way or another. I kind of felt that the way the midfield is set for Scotland, that you couldn't really just go with a flat four and play Forrest wide on the right. But with Forrest being out now, and he's got a fracture in his ankle, I believe. With Forrest being out of these games, I'm not convinced that it's the strongest formation available for Scotland. I think it's probably better going back to a flat 4-4-2, something like Mike Bassett here. But you go back to a 4-4-2 and you play to your strengths, and rather than having Scott McTominay at centre back, you put him back into midfield where he can really influence the game. And you try and do things that way rather than play McTominay in a position where he's only got very limited experience. His 2 games at international level were far from stellar, to be polite. So yeah, it just seems that it's almost just going with popular opinion for popular opinion's sake, and Clarke needs to kind of show a little bit of backbone there.
Looking at probably the last touch on it ahead of the sort of in terms of tactics and things like that is the striker formation. I don't know if it's quite a predicament, but Lyndon Dykes, Lawrence Shankland, Callum Patterson, Ollie McBurney look to be the options going into the game at Hampden against Israel. I mean, Lyndon Dykes has probably been the one who's been on most form out of the 4 of them, just in terms of this season, played the most minutes, scored the most goals, and he looked very impressive in the last 2 internationals. Regardless of who the opponents were, he looked fairly decent as well. So who do you think? I think he starts with 2 up front, regardless of whether it's 3 or 4 at the back. He seems to really like playing with 2 up front, and for me, if that is the case, then it's Lyndon Dykes and Ollie McBurney that start.
Yeah, I think so, and I'm not convinced that it's the best pairing. I think the 2 of them are fairly similar in how they play. I kind of think you're getting much just from Dykes and McBurney. I think McBurney's the better out of the 2. So I mean, if I was to choose between them, I would be McBurney. But I don't think he's got the right partner in the squad for him. For me, like I know we spoke about it before, but actually I think Kevin Nisbet would probably be really suited to playing alongside McBurney or Dykes. But yeah, of the options available, that does seem to be the obvious pairing.
I think Lawrence is perhaps one that is a bit different. He's a bit more poacher box, and he's also, I mean, he's more than just that, to be fair to him. I mean, like his goal against St Mirren the other week, brilliant. So it's more than just a poacher box penalty striker, and he would be a bit different. But I think in terms of if you're looking at quality, for me, Ollie McBurney's a Premier League striker, and I know Scotland fans love to hate McBurney on some fronts because of his past dropouts and things like that. But he's going to be Scotland's main striker for 4 or 5 years at least now, so you better get used to him. And he's proven that he can score goals, and whilst he's not perhaps going to be a 20 goal a season striker at Premier League level, he's definitely shown his capabilities, and Lyndon Dykes is much the same as well, although he probably has shown he has got more potential, at least at championship level, to score that level of goals like McBurney did for Swansea a few years ago. But I'll be interested to see who he goes up with up front. I can't see Callum Patterson starting, that's why I've not really mentioned him at all. I mean, he's a good versatile option. You'd like to think he'd maybe come off the bench if people were tiring late on. And Lawrence Shankland, I wouldn't be surprised to see him as well if they're chasing the game. He's obviously missing James Forrest, which has already been confirmed as a big blow. He's going to be out for 46 weeks, so it remains to be seen as well, actually, whether he even makes the next games in the playoff final, whether he does miss those games as well. He's been one of Steve Clarke's favourites. And to be fair to James Forrest, he has popped up on occasion for him. But it'll be interesting to see how he copes with that. So just on the game overall, how do you see it going?
I think Scotland should win it. I'm not convinced they will, but I think they should. So I'm going to say. What was that? Sorry.
Ever the optimist.
No, it's not even that. I think they've got the players there that they're for a better side than the Israelis. I'm just. I've seen this story a million times before when it comes to Scotland.
You don't want to build your hopes up too high, because even if you get through this game, which they should, I think if Scotland go out to Israel, then it's perhaps we've had our share of disappointments over the year. Watching.
In fact, do you know what really wouldn't surprise me? They put 4 or 5 past Israel, and then get scudded by Norway.
No, it wouldn't. I don't think you can rule anything out with Scotland. To be perfectly honest, it could. I mean, the Israel. I mean, I think I think if you went into this game in March, you'd be more confident than you are now, especially given when you watched how that Israel game panned out last month. I mean, if they come out and play the same, and if that game pans out fairly similar, then it's going to be very, very bumpy for Scotland. But hopefully, I mean, the country gets through. The country could do with a bit of lift in terms of Scottish football gets an absolute battering from pillar to post by just about everybody outside it and from some people in as well. So for Scotland to at least go one step closer to that major tournament that's been nagging at them for literally my whole life. This has been my
3 years.
this a bit of breaking news just as we were editing this video. Stuart Armstrong diagnosed with COVID-19 after receiving a positive test. Kieran Tierney and Ryan Christie as well having to self-isolate as a consequence of being in close contact with the Southampton midfielder, along with a couple members of the backroom staff at Scotland. A real blow for the country in terms of going into this massive game without 3 of its key players, but we do wish those affected a speedy recovery. Obviously, health comes first at any time, no more, most importantly, than during a global health pandemic. As well as that, there's also been injury news confirmed. Scott McKenna of Nottingham Forest wasn't used at the weekend. He's now been confirmed as out of the next 3 matches. Liam Palmer was subbed at half-time during Sheffield Wednesday's weekend match. He is also going to miss the game through injury, as well as Sheffield United's Ollie Burke. So that means Steve Clarke is now down in the space of us recording this, confirmed to have lost 6 players to his squad, which obviously changes the pace of this game dramatically. Just over 24 hours as I record this. Hopefully nothing else changes in that time, but it leaves Steve Clarke's squad, who named a bigger squad, in the hope that he would be able to get through these games as easy as possible, with it being a triple header of games, 3 games in 6 days, just over 24 hours before the biggest match of them all. And he loses a very large chunk of his squad. And it's not, with the greatest respect to other players in the squad, it is key members of his squad. You don't want to lose anybody, especially from international ventures, but to lose the likes of Kieran Tierney, Ryan Christie, Stuart Armstrong, it's a massive blow, and it leaves Scotland weakened in all areas of the park, really, apart from the goalkeeping department. There's at least 1 player from either the forward, midfield or defensive lines, all going to be missing. At least Scotland really short of options. Whether players are drafted into the squad now remains to be seen. There was problems last month with players coming into Scotland to play for the national team from the likes of the MLS. But we have seen SPFL players going out abroad to play with their national teams and going elsewhere. So who knows what the case will be on that front. But hopefully the guidelines do dictate that some people are allowed to be brought into the squad at such short notice. Steve Clarke obviously needing reinforcements for the squad. And it's a race against time, I suppose, to get them in before tomorrow night's match. And I mean, could this lead to the likes of under-21s players like Alan Campbell and Ross McCrory getting a call-up, or could the likes of Kevin Nisbet, who have been on really good form for the domestic scene for their respective clubs, also get the chance? It does remain to be seen. But that was a bit of breaking news just as we finished up recording this and ready to put it online. Go back to the outro now. Hopefully, fingers crossed that these injuries and positive tests don't change the face of this game too much. It's been nagging, it's gone. So Steve Clarke really does need a result, and if worst comes to worst, there will be serious questions to ask, because it will feel a bit like going back to the drawing board a bit. But we remain to see. We'll hope you have enjoyed this wee preview. We'll have instant reaction after the final whistle, whether Scotland have a victory or whether it's a chance to dissect another disappointing night for the national team. And UEFA Nations League games coming up as well. There's 2 of them, so there'll be 3 Scotland games in 6 days. A really testing schedule for the domestic players, especially when you consider the really condensed calendars a lot of these players are already playing to, especially the ones in the English Premier League. But all of that and more to come. We hope you have enjoyed. Please do remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and until next time, take it easy.